Kizamde, hop on the beat!
Across all of the supernatural forces in JoJo, by far the most omnipresent of them is fate. The presence of fate can be seen in every part from the original universe of JoJo. It informs everything that the characters do, and many characters are completely based on their relationship with fate. Fate as a plot device is present in a wide variety of media, all the way back to the ancient Greeks. However, in contemporary fiction, it is often viewed as a sort of cop-out when a story has nowhere to go, or is used as a cliché in Chosen One type stories. JoJo is not excluded from this kind of criticism, but I feel like it is unwarranted when you examine the ways that fate in JoJo differentiates itself. In this video, I will be going over how fate works in JoJo, and how it aligns itself with Araki's design philosophy. The most important thing to understand about fate in JoJo is that it is much more defined with its implementation than in other stories. In the world of JoJo, fate is a concrete, observable force in the world. Part 6 gives us the clearest definition of fate as described by Dio. His description of fate as gravity, and the gravity manipulation that is integral to his heaven plan, is not a coincidence. Instead of being an abstract idea as it is in other media, fate in JoJo is quite literally a gravitational pull, moving you along a predestined path. You could even say the existing law of gravity itself is fate. Every person has their own gravity, and any meeting of two people is determined by the pull between them. This idea of an abstract, supernatural concept being turned scientific is extremely common among Araki's work. The concept of a gravity between people has been explored since long before Part 6. Part 4 was the introduction of the stand arrow, and the idea of stand users being drawn to each other. The arrow is known to seek out those with potential, enough that Kira's father was able to use it like a dowsing rod, letting it point to where it wanted to go. It may have been this seeking of potential that caused the meteor to gravitate towards Earth in the first place. The gravity of the human spirit drew it in. Dio's character and his philosophy is an important topic when it comes to this discussion. In Part 1, his initial goal was to take control of the Joestar family. After rejecting his humanity, his ambition was extended to the country and later the entire world. This is not a complex goal, but even as early as Part 1, we can see some of the seeds of his later motivation. He had a very traumatic childhood, and that, along with his conflict with Jonathan, would influence the philosophy he developed later. After his defeat, Dio spent 100 years at the bottom of the ocean. He was conscious during this time, and probably had quite a lot to think about. While it may not be necessary for explaining what comes later, I do believe that Dio reached some form of enlightenment during his time spent here. After emerging, Dio befriended the fortune teller Enya, and it is at this point that he reached an understanding of fate. Dio's true goal is to achieve his idea of heaven. Heaven is a state of mind in which you are completely aware of your destiny and come to accept it. As someone with a turbulent childhood and who is endlessly fated to have conflict with the Joestars, this would be the ideal state of being for someone like Dio. In order for heaven to be attained, time must be accelerated to the singularity point, and the universe is recreated. All living beings are lifted out of the universe and placed back in, with the memories of their previous experiences. Because of this, they are aware of everything that will ever happen to them. Made in Heaven is the only stand capable of doing this, and understanding the way that it is created is essential to understanding fate. Dio's soul was reborn through the Green Baby, which is essentially his will to attain heaven given form as a living being. This fused with Pucci and began changing his stand into Sea-Moon, which is able to manipulate gravity. It is said to us that gravity and time are one and the same, so when Sea-Moon uses its powers at certain coordinates and with certain gravitational influences, it can manipulate time itself. Not only are gravity and time one and the same, but fate is included in that as well. By creating this new universe, Pucci gains control over fate to create heaven. Dio's idea of heaven is an inherently complacent one, since it is not just knowing your own future, but completely coming to terms with it. This mindset is perfectly in line with what Dio called peace of mind in Part 3. If you completely accept fate, good or bad, you'll be at peace. Pucci's ideology is similar to Dio's. The traumatic events he experienced as a young man were so severe that he became obsessed with the sequence of events. When he examined it, he could not determine whose fault it really was. Was it solely the actions of the people Pucci hired? He was the one that hired them after all, and he is the one that omitted the information that could have avoided the situation entirely. Was it Pucci's fault for acting so harshly after hearing the confession? Or is the mother the one at fault for stealing Wes in the first place? But even then, her actions were influenced by her own child's death, and what could have predated that? Could this all have been predetermined by some event that happened long before anyone was aware? His fixation on how Perla's death happened made Dio's words ring true to him. All of these events and chance meetings that have happened were due to the unseen influence of gravity. He would eventually seek out Dio and begin to understand fate, fully committing himself to creating heaven. In a world where all people can know and accept their destiny, the internal trauma from what happened to Perla can be averted. Kira is similar to Dio in many ways. Just like Dio, he had a troublesome childhood, which eventually led to him committing great atrocities. Their main similarity, however, is their outlook on life. Kira's goal is to have a quiet life, very much in line with Dio's idea of peace of mind. At times, Kira seems to be blessed by fate, and he is surrounded by an inhuman amount of good luck. He was given the perfect stand for destroying evidence, and has succeeded in staying completely free of suspicion. His own gravity was even strong enough to draw the arrow to him a second time, giving him a nearly foolproof method of avoiding detection. However, even with all of this, he was still overcome, and his luck ironically disappeared. Kira's flaw was that although he only wanted to have a quiet life, he led a lifestyle that was inherently chaotic. He wished to have a quiet life in spite of this, rather than accepting his own circumstances. This contradiction eventually caused his luck and, by extension, fate to abandon him. Others, however, are not so keen to sit by and let fate happen. The character of Diavolo is very heavily based on overcoming fate, and this becomes one of the main themes of Part 5. Diavolo's personality is steeped in paranoia and a desire to completely erase any traces of his past. His stand, King Crimson, is able to see a forecast of the future, and through his time skips, remove himself from what is fated to happen. Anything in the prediction is absolute, so even if he removes himself, the results of his original actions will still move along as if he were there, pushed along by a form of gravity. Diavolo is constantly trying to best fate, at the expense of countless people around him. However, Diavolo is not really escaping fate like he wishes. As we know from Part 6, fate can be changed, but the changing of fate is still predestined. Even the nature of Diavolo's ability reveals this to us. In order to know what to do next, he is obsessively viewing a premonition of what will happen. While he thinks he is escaping fate, he is still ultimately a slave to it. Fate seems to operate on a principle of what goes up must come down. While you can change fate, it will eventually self-correct in the other direction. Diavolo's changing of fate is what made Giorno fated to attain Requiem. His own meddling in fate is what causes him to have the harshest punishment out of any of the characters. Dio and Diavolo are the two polar opposites for how to deal with fate. Beyond the obvious naming convention between them, their ideologies are fundamentally opposed. One is obsessed with changing their fate, while the other completely accepts it. Both of these, however, are counter to the ideology of our protagonists. While the antagonist's point of view is often fatalist, the protagonists do not concern themselves with what is predestined, but instead doing what they think is right. This is really one of the most important lessons about fate in the series, that it doesn't matter if fate is altered. One way or another, it will end up favoring the just path. This idea of a right path that the characters are following can even be seen in the most recent chapters of Part 8. In an afterword written for Part 5, Araki describes the protagonist's relationship with fate. He says that one of the main themes of Part 5 is the question of how to deal with fate. Just like Dio, Giorno and the other Part 5 characters were born into a sad life where things happen to them beyond their control. How do you deal with something that controls all of existence? The answer the protagonists have is not to try and change fate. They know that their own sense of justice is the only thing they need to be happy. This was supported in Part 6, with the final fate-related revelation. After Pucci had spent so long justifying his horrible actions with the end goal of heaven, he is defeated by Emporio, who understands that fate only follows the path of justice. The fate that exists within JoJo is the perfect system to represent the story Araki wanted to tell. The mechanics of fate in JoJo are also far more fleshed out than I've seen in any other series. Despite this, its depth seems to be too often ignored by fans, and the system is at times dismissed by people altogether. I hope that this video helped you reach a greater understanding of fate, and that in turn, you have a better understanding of the themes it represents in JoJo. This was a fun video to do, so if you have a video idea for a similar topic, comment it down below. If you want to be updated on new videos or leave suggestions, join the HamanBeat Discord using the link in the description. You can also support the channel on Patreon to receive Discord perks and other rewards, such as uncut music reference videos. And finally, subscribe to the channel for future videos. This is the part of the video where I thank my $5 and up patrons. Thank you to Norden the Lich, Alex Ramirez, Raziana, Boat Girl, The Insane Penguin, Anasui Hat, Doorbell, and Cloudy.